Thank you very much, and thank you to Stephanie and the Nestlé Health Sciences team for the invitation to speak at this symposium. It's lovely to be here in Valencia. So these are my disclosure statements. So I've been asked to talk about effective exercise strategies for healthy aging in this session. And as much as I will try to focus this on exercise, it's absolutely impossible to talk about effective exercise strategies for healthy aging without talking about nutrition as well. So Tommy's given us a really lovely overview of the importance of nutrition. My background is in sport and exercise nutrition. I'm not a clinician, but my research background and my interests are around the interactions between exercise and nutrition and the synergistic effects that they both can have, both in athletes, but also through healthy aging as well. So I will do my best to kind of keep the focus around exercise, but nutrition will come into my talk in many areas, because we absolutely can't ignore the synergistic effects of exercise and nutrition together, particularly when we're thinking about maintaining muscular mass and strength. So we all know the benefits of exercise. There's many benefits of exercise and exercise training. And exercise is certainly a potent, cost-effective means of reducing age-related chronic disease risk. I think it's really nice to look at exercise in this model that was published in Frontiers in Physiology in 2022, which really highlights the effect that each acute exercise bout is basically mimicking the effects that we see in aging, or the physiological and metabolic responses that we see in aging. So every time we do an exercise bout, we see changes in our metabolic and in our physiology. But actually, these changes are very similar to the natural changes or the responses that we see in aging. So actually, the protective effects of exercise are through this kind of cumulative effect that we do an exercise bout, our body responds to that exercise bout, and it adapts to that exercise bout. And over time, that is creating this protective effect against the effects of aging. So this diagram from the same paper just highlights this a little bit more clearly. So you can see that every acute exercise bout is similar to an acute aging stimulus. And then when we recover from that exercise bout, then we adapt, and that means that we are protecting the body from those aging stimuli later in life, so that we are actually protecting ourselves and attenuating that age chronic disease risk as we go through the life course. So a really important message from this is that every little bit helps. Every bout of exercise, every bit of physical activity is helping to protect against age-related diseases. So if nothing else that you take away from this is that little bits and often throughout the life course are really important and all help to have a protective effect on the effects of aging. But we're here to talk about muscle mass and strength, so that's what the focus is going to be, despite the fact that we know that there are so many other metabolic and physiological and social and well-being effects of exercise strategies. So, as Tommy's already talked about, this reduction in muscle mass and strength, or sarcopenia, has major consequences on lots of different aspects of health and well-being in aging. So, the reduced quality of life, increased dependence on others, increased risk of falls and frailty, and increased mortality risk. So, clearly, so much of the exercise literature is really focused around how can we improve muscle mass or strength or prevent that decline that we see with aging. But what I will say is that although there is a large amount of evidence out there in this area, we still find it quite difficult to say what is an effective exercise strategy. It's not that simple. So as much as we have great evidence from very well-controlled studies, from lab-based interventions, we're still not seeing that the effects that we want to see, particularly in certain communities. So if we think about muscle protein synthesis and think about exercise and food intake, this is a very simplistic diagram to demonstrate what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And if any of you were in Luc van Loon's talk yesterday, he talked a lot about this muscle protein synthesis, muscle protein breakdown pattern that we go through all day, every day. So you can see here that quite clearly the food that we eat and the exercise that we do are really important in that stimulus of muscle protein synthesis. And from a very, very simplistic model, what we need to make sure is that the A's on this diagram are bigger than the B's. So the protein synthesis is greater than the muscle protein breakdown. And that's why that exercise and meal interaction is so, so important to think about in terms of muscle mass and strength and promoting muscle protein synthesis throughout the life course. So again, this isn't new. We've known this for a long time, that this interaction between resistance exercise in particular and protein intake is beneficial for muscle mass and muscle strength. And this is old data, and I've put this on purpose to show that, you know, for a long period of time, both in younger and in older adults, we've known that this combination of resistance exercise and protein intake is what we need to do. But as I said before, it's not that simple. We see huge variations in what is the exercise that somebody needs to do, how much do they need to do, how often do they need to exercise, what sort of resistance do they need to be able to be working at to have the changes, how much protein, in what source should that protein be, as Tommy's already talked about. There are lots and lots of different questions that actually are still quite unclear, particularly to the general population. And actually, importantly to note also that a lot of the studies that have looked at this exercise protein interaction have been very focused around supplementation. So not necessarily using food or meals, but looking at usually whey protein supplementation around exercise. So thinking about the practicalities and what we can then do in terms of translating this research into practice is really important. And that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of my talk, is not necessarily lots of studies that have shown benefits of exercise and nutrition, because we know that it works, but it's actually how do we create effective exercise strategies that people are going to do and that they are going to stick with and that they are going to enjoy as part of their lifestyle. So this is some work that we've been doing at Newcastle, so with the AGE research group and through a funded studentship from the Centre for Integrated Research in Musculoskeletal Ageing, where we basically have set out to try and better understand what makes an effective exercise strategy. What are the barriers? What are the facilitators to exercise in community-dwelling older adults? And this was just the first part of this work that was a survey to try and get some data. And there are other studies that have published similar information about this to really highlight what are the motivators, but what are the barriers to people actually taking on a resistance exercise program to improve their muscle strength and mass. So it's quite a small sample, but as I say, the results that we found were very similar to what others have reported in terms of the motivators and the barriers to resistance exercise training. Okay, so some of the motivators then, so that people can understand that exercise is important for their physical health. The social aspect is absolutely key to a lot of what we find in terms of adherence to an exercise program. So friendship, support, that sort of moral support around exercise, and that ability to be able to go on that exercise journey with others is hugely important as a motivator. Obviously, it makes people feel good, so the psychological aspects. Certainly, the accessibility and the cost of actually doing exercise is important for us to consider. So not everybody has access to nice gym situations, to classes, to these things that some of us may take for granted that absolutely are important in terms of how people are able to adapt and maintain an exercise program. Education is absolutely key. So many people say that if they have somebody there that is able to support them and help them and guide them through their resistance training, that is what keeps them going, and that people do not have the knowledge and the confidence to actually even go into a gym setting, never mind to start lifting weights and doing the resistance exercise program. So the barriers are kind of the same things, to be honest. The motivators and the barriers are different, obviously, for different individuals, but certainly some of the aspects around physical health, where many people just reported that they just didn't think that they were able to do resistance exercise. It's just this, it's not for me. I'm not I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I don't understand the importance. I don't feel that that's something that I can actually do. I'm not strong. I couldn't go into a gym and start lifting weights. And often that was related to things like pain because of other conditions, like arthritis, other disabilities, afraid to fall or to hurt themselves whilst doing the exercise program. Motivation, lots of people saying that I just don't, why would I need to do that? I don't need to exercise now that I'm older. It's not important to me. And I think these are things that we take for granted, but actually we don't truly realise that a lot of people don't understand the benefits of exercise as they get older. Obviously the cost is, which to some is, again, that lack of access to facilities and lack of knowledge, and this safety aspect, and that it's not for me. And obviously other people that have the other caring responsibilities or feel like they just don't have the time in their life because they have others that they need to care for and aren't able to make that time for exercise. So I just want to share a few quotes from a study that we did a few years back. And the study was very much a feasibility and acceptability study around a community-based strength training intervention. So it was a short intervention. It was 6 weeks, twice a week, to go into a community-based gym for older adults. And it was to see whether, firstly, that they were happy to go into that kind of environment, but also to see the feasibility of consuming milk as a recovery strategy. And I'm going to talk about recovery a little bit later on. But I just wanted to share some of these quotes because I think it really just brings to life the feelings that a lot of people have when they start an exercise program, or that I guess some of the things that maybe put people off. So overwhelmingly, the social aspect of exercise comes through really strongly within these quotes. So, the best thing I've ever done, to do a 6-week resistance exercise training program, 2 days a week, the best thing I've ever done, to meet new people, to make friends, and to all be in the same boat doing it together. That support and that encouragement. And interestingly, this aspect around just that general well-being feeling of wanting to eat well after exercise, wanting to kind of look after yourself once you've started to embark on that exercise program. Again, that sort of social aspect, some of the negative things here around cost and the accessibility of exercise, exercise communities, gyms that people feel that they are comfortable to go into. And I'd never go on my own. It's too boring. I wouldn't feel comfortable in that environment. So these really strongly bring through the effect of this social group intervention is so key for an effective exercise strategy. So just to talk about recovery, so I've just mentioned that we've ran this study looking at milk as an exercise recovery strategy. And recovery is something that always tends to get forgotten about around an exercise program. And I think it's absolutely key to maintaining exercise, adherence to exercise, and seeing the effectiveness of any exercise program. So this is not just around making sure that we are consuming protein after exercise for protein synthesis and muscle mass, but so many other aspects that are important in exercise recovery. And particularly, we've been focusing on this effect around reduced muscle soreness. So we all know that feeling if you haven't done some exercise for a little while, or maybe you do something different, you go to the gym, you maybe do a different class, or you go out for a run and you've not done it for a while. It hurts, doesn't it? The next couple of days after that exercise session, you feel stiff, you feel sore. That is enough to put people off then sticking to that exercise program. If the first few times they do it, they feel not so good afterwards, don't feel like they're getting the benefits from it, that will quite quickly lead to a drop off in adherence. So we've been looking at this as a really important aspect of an effective exercise strategy, is understanding that recovery process for older adults. So we know quite well in athletes how they recover after different exercise sessions, what the time course of that recovery might look like. Most athletes and younger people know that feeling of soreness is a good thing. That's the adaptation, that's the process of getting stronger after an exercise session. But we know very, very little about that time course in older adults. So again, we can say your resistance exercise is great, everyone should be going to the gym, they should be having their protein. But actually the reality of some of these other consequences of exercise are really, really important to consider. So what can we do to ensure that people are recovering well, that they feel good after their exercise session, and that they are getting the benefits that they should be seeing? So that accelerated recovery, that reduction in soreness, but those gains in strength and fitness. So again, we've asked these questions to populations across the north of England to see what do people actually understand about exercise recovery. Do they know what it is, how important it is? And from this data, we actually found that most people, that these were older adults, so over 70, nutrition was never mentioned as a recovery strategy. So when they were talking about doing exercise, the only things that they really knew that were good were rest as a recovery strategy or heat as a recovery strategy. So less than 1% of the people that we spoke to actually even mentioned nutrition, never mind protein. So this really highlights that we have a huge job to do around education and that interaction between exercise and dietary intake. There was an overwhelmingly negative view of recovery supplements. So that again is this is not for me. Why would I go and take a protein shake or a protein bar that you can buy in the kind of sports nutrition shops? So overwhelmingly negative about that. But what we wanted to say is, well, what about food? If it was food, not supplements, would that be something that would be more acceptable? So certainly whole foods and certainly things like milk were considered to be something that was acceptable as a recovery strategy. And in fact, milk is just as good as taking protein powders if that is something that people are able to incorporate into their exercise regime. So really just highlighting that this is a difficult area that we know from a practitioner, from a scientific point of view, what we need to do, but the reality is people don't still understand. A lot of people do not get this, do not understand that importance around that exercise and diet interaction. And these are difficult studies to run, difficult interventions to run, and I just wanted to highlight this paper that was just published earlier this month. And it was quite a difficult, so Ellie, whose PhD was a difficult paper to write because this was basically why our interventions don't necessarily always work in terms of the types of studies that we want to run. There are so many challenges in understanding exercise, and so thinking about what are the considerations that we need to take into account. So I just wanted to highlight this as something which may help people who are maybe starting to embark on this journey about thinking about interventions, thinking about studies in different populations. Okay, so to summarize then, so an effective exercise strategy absolutely needs to be underpinned by expert guidance and support. I think that is overwhelmingly seen in the published work that is out there at the moment. What that expert guidance and support looks like actually is important to consider as well. How can we sort of do more in terms of co-design, co-creation and co-delivery with the populations that we're working with? Absolutely, the exercise sessions need to be fun and sociable, and as I've said, the group exercise aspect is fundamental to that adherence and that enjoyment from many, many studies that have been published in this area. And I think education around exercise recovery is really important. So particularly that protein as part of an exercise strategy is fundamental to seeing the benefits from that exercise session. And as I said, this may be things that we see as normal and that we do day to day, but from the populations that we've spoken to, this absolutely isn't the case. So we've got a lot of work still to do in terms of that promotion and that education in the key populations that we're working with. So thank you.